Welcome to Municipal Affairs. The Alberta government is once again zeroing in on local governance, unveiling significant changes through two key pieces of legislation. Bill 50, the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, and Bill 54, the Election Statute Amendment Act of 2025. Now, these bills aim to reshape how municipalities operate, how local politicians are held accountable, and how they transition from municipal politics to provincial politics if they choose. Now, among the proposed reforms in both bills are eliminating municipal code of conducts, formalizing rules around campaign financing, and clarifying the process of amending or repealing local bylaws. Now, the new standards for intermunicipal collaboration frameworks are also on the table in these bills, a system originally intended to foster cooperation between municipalities, both urban and rural, but one that has sparked debate, especially among rural communities. Now, the legislations go further. They propose new recall legislation standards, outline rules for municipal officials seeking provincial office, and introduce the idea of an independent ethics commissioner to handle complaints against municipal leaders. Now, these changes promise to spark conversations across Alberta cities, towns, and rural regions. And we recently sat down with Tyler Gandam, president of the Alberta Municipalities, to explore what these legislation shifts mean for the future of municipal governance here in the province of Alberta. President Gandam, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about two pieces of legislation that were just recently introduced in April of 2025 from the Alberta government, and that is Bill 50 and the most recent one, Bill 54. I want to start with Bill 50, if you don't mind, and get your initial reactions as president of the Alberta municipalities. What was your initial response to the rollout of this bill?
Well, I guess compared to what we went through last year with bills 18 and 20, trying to increase consultation, building a better relationship with the province. This year, when they went into spring sitting, it was nice to have those conversations with Minister McIver, get a bit of a heads up on what may or may not be coming, and then have the opportunity for the province to put together a webinar at our request so that members could share concerns, ask questions, and make sure they've got a good understanding of what the bill is going to be when or if it becomes legislation. So my initial reaction on it is, again, like some good stuff in there. Alberta municipalities had gone through it. We sent our recommendations to the minister's office, looking for a few clarifications, some cleanup on some of that legislation, and just making sure that there aren't any unintended consequences for municipalities when we're looking at changes to things like getting rid of codes of conduct, and making sure that they understand what those implications could be over the next 6, 8, 10, 12 months while we're without that code of conduct, and maybe some of the problems that we might see arise or continue to happen in our municipalities.
So I want to stick there if you don't mind. It sounds like from that statement that there's already been some unintended consequences of this bill. Has there, or am I just reading too much into your statement there?
No, not necessarily so far. I think we're missing the gap. There is the potential for problems to continue to happen. Minister McIver spoke about 3 different instances where codes of conduct had been weaponized or maybe taken too far in terms of what sanctions were issued. And then we looked at how the courts had taken care of that, rectified it, and made sure that everybody was on a level playing field. But we didn't hear about the dozens of other instances that councils use codes of conduct, sanctions, and have a good working relationship with one another and cleaned up a lot of problems along the way using the codes of conduct appropriately. So I think that there's going to be an instance, or there could be instances where with the lack of codes, there won't be any accountability for members of council. And I don't think everything should be elevated to the minister's office when a member of council is in contradiction of what their role should be.
Now, Minister McIver at RMA and at Alberta Municipality said that this is something he was looking into because it was a request from Alberta municipalities and the rural municipalities of Alberta. Did you ask for them to remove code of conducts from this, or is this coming from another outside source? Because it seems I'm hearing contradicting messages from the province and what municipalities are telling me.
Yeah, no, we didn't ask them to get rid of codes of conduct. There could have been or should be some cleanup that's going to happen, and I one of the things that I'm excited to see is what those codes of conduct look like for all of the municipalities across the province, and I think it could be a lot more uniform in how we deal with things, getting the input from municipalities on what's working, what's not working, and then for a council to be able to issue sanctions if that's necessary as well. A few years ago, Minister McIver was talking about getting rid of codes of conduct, and overwhelmingly, I can only speak for my association, but Alberta municipalities and its members said, don't get rid of codes of conduct. We need these for good governance and having a respectful workplace for our members of council, as well as what the public and what staff can expect from councillors in their behaviors. So, no, we didn't ask for codes of conduct to be removed.
What would be an upgrade to the piece of legislation that was tabled that would help municipalities address some of these? I don't want to say conflicts because I don't think they are truly big conflicts, but challenges that municipalities are going through with codes of conducts.
I think one of the big things we're going to have is if we've got a provincial ethics commissioner, where we have kind of a one-stop shop for municipalities to access that resource. I know that some municipalities have that in place already. So it's, from my understanding, they're not going to have to get rid of what they currently have, but the provincial ethics commissioner would be made available to municipalities across the province. I think that's a huge benefit to municipalities because now everybody's kind of playing from the same playbook, getting the same answers, and there's no ambiguity for what is considered a breach of a code of conduct and what isn't based on an interpretation or an outside investigation done. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. And I think that there's a real opportunity here for the province to get some insight from municipalities on what's working and what's not working in terms of codes of conduct. And we should expect a higher level of behavior and respect from our members of council.
One of the other pieces that was in Bill 50 was around governance of ICFs, or intergovernment collaborative frameworks, between urbans, rurals, urbans. From Alberta municipality standpoint, what was your takeaway from that part of the legislation in Bill 50?
I think they're missing some pieces there in terms of what should be included in an ICF. Stormwater and libraries, I think, were the two that stand out for me. I think that the precedent has been set previously on managing stormwater in a municipality or in the county or in the rural pieces here where we're responsible for managing that stormwater that comes from or starts in our municipality and moves outwards. And I think that it's important that we have that piece of legislation that's in there. There are many services that municipalities, both rural and urban, provide to its neighboring communities. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for those services operating and some of that capital to be covered by that neighboring municipality and its residents who are utilizing those services.
Okay, so I have attended Alberta municipalities. I've attended your sister organization, RMA, and ICF is always on the docket when it comes to the policy resolution parts of this conversation, your conventions. Um, did Alberta municipalities come out in a more positive light with the proposed bill that was tabled, or are the urban counterparts in the ICF a little bit further back?
I don't think either. I think there's some room for some improvement in the legislation. I think that we need to take into consideration the services that are being used by neighboring municipalities and make sure that those communities are compensated for that. I would really hate to get into a place or a position where a municipality that's offering a service now has a two-tiered system for residents and non-residents. I think that takes away from the regionalization approach. I think that breaks down relationships, and I don't think that that's good governance or a good way to treat people in our communities. we don't know boundaries. What we do is we utilize the services that are closest to us or the ones that we enjoy the most. And I think that that should be free flowing in terms of where we're using these services. And I would hate to see that two-tiered approach. I just think that we can clean up that legislation and make sure that those services are being equally compensated for by the users.
Because I'm going to play a little devil's advocate with you here for a second, Tyler, if you don't mind. Because the average resident on the street, if they live, I'm going to just pick on Wetaskiwin, the county of Wetaskiwin for 2 seconds, but the average resident doesn't understand that if I go in, if I'm a county resident, go into Wetaskiwin and use your library, I'm not going to be charged something different from if just a resident from the city comes into their library. How does this impact the budgeting of an urban municipality when it comes to those challenges of utilizing the county, utilizing urban infrastructure, property, libraries, pools, skating rinks? Does it really put a added pressure, or is this inside baseball we're talking about?
No, it absolutely does. So municipalities pay for these services and are offering them to residents and neighboring municipalities as well. And I can't think of a service that a municipality provides that is at 100% cost recovery. So that municipality is subsidizing that service. And so I think that needs to be taken into consideration with anybody using a resource outside of their municipality, the impact it has to that local residential business owner, non-residential taxpayer, that they are subsidizing that service, and which is fine. I have absolutely no problem with that. I think it's exactly what municipalities are designed to do: provide services and make sure that the customers of your municipality, your businesses, and your residents all have the services that they would like in their community. And we hear that through our budget deliberation processes, what we should increase, what we should decrease in terms of our level of service. And I think everything is fair game, but it comes at a cost. And I would hope that everybody using resources outside of their communities understands that the majority of those are subsidized by that local municipality.
What would make Bill 50 a lot better in your eyes as president of Alberta Municipalities around the ICF agreement?
I think just making sure that we have a better outlook on those mandatory services or those services that should be included in an ICF. And like I said, libraries and stormwater are two pieces of that I think should be. In Wetaskiwin, we have to manage stormwater that leaves our municipality. I don't think it's any different for the municipality or our county to be responsible for the stormwater that comes into our municipality.
I appreciate that. I want to also talk about Bill 54 that was tabled earlier this week from recording this interview. And that is around how elections happen in this province. And one of the big pieces that I took away was citizens' initiatives and lowering the threshold for recall legislation. Now, I'm going to sort of burst people's bubbles, but you were one of the mayors in Alberta that had a recall petition against him. It didn't go anywhere, but it did go to against you. The lowering of this threshold could see a weaponization of recall legislation more than we have seen in the past. Is there concern from Alberta municipalities that what the province has introduced could spark an avalanche of recall legislations against people and even weaponize them?
Yep, absolutely. This is definitely one of those hills I think are going to die on because it takes away from our election process. I've heard it from Minister McIver that actually one of the reasons for the codes of conduct not being a huge priority right now as we lead into an election is that if there is a member of council who is a bad actor, that should get sorted out in an election. Well, if that's the case, then why are we doing the same thing? Why aren't we doing the same thing with recall legislation? If they were concerned about codes of conduct being weaponized, I can absolutely assure you that recall legislation has been weaponized across the province, and not just in my case for supporting a homeless shelter. I could go on for a long time about how inappropriate recall legislation is. We live in a democracy. We have 4-year terms. If a member of council isn't doing their job, Minister McIver and the provincial government have shown that they can remove members of council when they're doing something so egregious or possibly illegal. that there are ways to deal with that. But for a recall legislation to be able to pull and have 60, 90, 120 days to gather X number of signatures to remove that person from their position, I think is a complete waste of time and takes away from the work that municipal councils are doing. And the other thing that I'm not really in favor of, or think that is a little bit ridiculous, is the fact that there are two different standards, one for municipal and one for the province. If recall legislation was so important and we wanted to make sure that elected officials are being held accountable, why is there a difference in what the threshold is and how long a community or a group has to gather those signatures and how many signatures are required? If it's so important that the province is holding elected officials accountable, why is there a difference between the province and the municipalities in their electeds and how they're going to be recalled?
Well, if Minister McIver gets back to me, I will ask that question directly to him. But the other part of the Bill 54 is the citizens-led initiatives. Premier Smith, in her press conference around this, said that she wants a citizens' initiatives just like what California has, where people have referendums on the ballot at every election. Now, last time I checked, you are a municipal leader and we elect you to make the tough decisions. Is this taking away the role that you as elected officials across this province as municipal leaders would need to do? Because I would imagine, again, this could be weaponized and in a very, very bad way if it comes to infrastructure projects, because people don't want to spend money, but they want their pools, they want their libraries, but that costs money and they don't want to pay for it. Are you concerned that this part of Bill 54 could be weaponized as well?
Absolutely. And not necessarily just weaponized, but making decisions or pushing a decision forward on something that you don't have the background information on, or you might not appreciate how much a debenture like that is going to cost. So it's going to cost you an extra $1 million a year. You don't have the reserves to pay for it. The infrastructure that's in place is either adequate or inadequate. Members of council, and no different than the federal or provincial government, sit through hours and hours and hours and hours of meetings and read through hundreds, if not thousands of pages of agendas and information. And we have people come in that share with us their experience, their expertise, whether it's engineers or consultants, on why or why not something should or shouldn't be done. And then that's how councils are making their decision. If we turn things like this into political decisions, you're going to take away from the election process. People aren't going to be running for what's in the best interest of their community. They're going to be running on what is going to get me elected or reelected. And that's really unfortunate. I think we see that enough times right now where issues aren't being dealt with, in my mind, appropriately or as well as they could or should be, because they're worried about being reelected in the next election. And it's really unfortunate. And I think we're seeing municipalities, provinces, and countries struggle with people trying to maintain that popular vote and not doing what is actually in the best interest of the community, the province, or the country.
I can imagine what the answer is already, but I need to ask it. Bill 50, Bill 54. Did Alberta municipalities want either of these bills or the proposed changes that have been laid out by the province? Because you say at the beginning of the interview that you were happy that the sort of collaboration between the province and the municipalities, but in our conversations, it seems like nothing that was in the bills is something that you guys wanted. Are these bills what municipalities need right now?
No, I don't think so. I think there's pieces of it that are needed or will help out. Like I said, improvements to legislation on codes of conduct, absolutely. But I've seen over the last few weeks about different orders of government staying in their lane and managing what they're mandated to do. And I think that this is an overreach by the provincial government into municipalities and the work that they're doing. And yes, I know we are creatures of the province and we are here to serve at their pleasure. But at the same time, if you're going to get so deep into our operations, why do we have municipal councils? If you're going to start mandating and dictating what we're going to be doing, then it takes away from, in Alberta municipalities case, 264 municipalities who have very gifted, talented, dedicated members of council who are trying to do the best for their communities, now being handcuffed by the province in how we're going to do things potentially, and how we're going to move forward. And I think it's going to be a bit of a slow burn in terms of what we're going to see as how it's going to deteriorate municipalities. But if we've got a referendum on every decision that councils are going to make, nothing's going to get done. And in some instances, things are going to get done and they're not going to be in the best interest of that municipality.
President Gandam, always a pleasure to sit down with you. Thank you so much. I feel like this is not going to be the last conversation we have around code of conduct as we head into this election. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
But the conversation doesn't stop at the urban boundaries. It goes on to the rural communities as well. And to better understand how these bills could impact rural communities, where intermunicipal collaboration and governance structures often look a little different, we sat down with Rural Municipalities of Alberta President Carl Westerlund for the rural perspective on both Bill 50 and 54. President Westerlund, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about Bill 50 and Bill 54, the two provincial bills that have kind of shaped how municipalities will be moving forward. From RMA's perspective on around Bill 50, and particularly around the Intergovernmental Collaborative Frameworks, how does RMA react to the sort of changes that the provincial government has laid out?
Well, there's some positives to take away particularly with the ICFs. We know we've heard from a number of our members the issues with the legislation as it stands right now, and the difficulties that a number of them had going forward, including court cases that had to come out from those. So we are hopeful. They're here to stay. We are glad that there is some, we call them guardrails or parameters have been put up around on what those agreements will look like and how they'll work moving forward in the future.
It would seem like, and this is an outsider's perspective, well, looking, not really an outsider perspective, but from my standpoint, RMA came out a little bit better off than the urban counterparts because there was a lot of friction between the two organizations and between the rural and urban municipalities. I've attended both conventions, and this seems to be a hot topic of discussion for the rural and urban municipalities. Are your members reacting in a positive light when they see the changes in Bill 50 around the ICFs?
Yes, it's been very positive from our members. We're happy to see that some definitions are going to be included. Some of the gray areas have been, tightened up a bit. Obviously, anytime that you have municipalities that end up in courts battling out issues, that's never a good thing. And I think at the end of the day, if you look at what the ICFs were supposed to do, it was supposed to bring a spirit of collaboration and partnership. And in some cases, it actually has taken really great working relationships and completely torn them apart. So did the complete opposite. And I think with the changes that we're going to see going forward, where hopefully we won't see that type of outcomes come in the future. Time will tell, I guess, as we move through this. I would suspect a lot of municipalities will wait till after the municipal election to tackle this issue because it can be often difficult. One thing I want to note is with the urbans, often, they only have to negotiate one ICFs, where we have on the rural side, some of our rurals have to, upward of 22 different communities they have to deal with and ICF agreements that they have to come up with. So, that in itself tells you the difficulties and the kind of, I guess, maybe the one-sided view that you could see with it too as well. So,
to push back on that just for a second, because I know some rural municipalities, and I've chatted with a few in my last few weeks, that some ICFs are just basically a page and that's it, saying we'll work together, because some of these rural municipalities don't share too much, but they do have an agreement that is in place around an ICF. So it is a little bit, you can't really say 20 because like about 5 of them are urban rural challenges, right?
Yeah, you'll see those higher numbers, especially with the rurals that have got particularly a lot of summer villages within them, or other smaller villages. And I'll take a look at my community, for instance. I believe we have 7, and of those 2 really are an urban type setting. And those ones that are outside, obviously, when I'm dealing with Parkland County or Yellowhead County, Woodland or Yellowhead County, they're super easy, obviously, because we don't have any residents out there. Yes, some of our road networks connect in, but we've already got really sound, really good agreements out there, so it's not an issue. So
One of the big things that came out of this is municipalities have to work together because we
Absolutely.
all know that everything is being stretched thin right now. Does this bill 50 around the ICFs, because I'm going to talk about code of conduct in about 2 seconds here, but does the ICF move forward in a positive fashion with this new interpretation that the province has laid out?
I think it will, and I'm excited to sit down and work through them. I think when things are laid out and a bit more clear what the expectations are and the openness to have the conversations and value both sides what they bring to the table. I think we're going to have a lot more success this time around.
One of the other big pieces in Bill 50 was around code of conducts. Now, I know RMA was calling for the abolishment or the changes to code of conducts because they were quote unquote being potentially weaponized. From RMA's perspective, is this a good sign to less politicized municipal councils?
We're definitely kind of in the middle on this one. We didn't want to see the code of conducts completely gone. They needed some major changes for sure to them. Obviously, we have, and we've been witness to them being weaponized in some communities, whether it's council to council or the public to council or administration or vice versa. So we are remaining hopeful that there is some conversations and talk that the province is looking at an integrity commissioner type position or department that will look after complaints going forward. Because at the end of the day, Chris, you and I both know no code of conduct is not a good thing. I can already give you several examples of council meetings already where some questionable things have happened. Most council meetings are available online, so just encourage you to watch them and you can see it. And unfortunately, bad behavior is not going to go away, and we do need something in place to handle that and deal with it fairly. I think that's the big key piece here is make sure that it's dealt in a fair and timely manner.
One of the other big bills that came out at the end of April was Bill 54, which changes the elections and citizen initiatives and the sort of the threshold for recall legislation. I'm assuming you've had time to look at it. If you haven't, then I'm going to get sort of initial reactions. What did you hear in this bill that would better rural municipalities, if any?
There's definitely some questions around the recall legislation, and I'll be as bold as to say as, I don't mind having that type of legislation in place. I think it's a good check, but at the same time, if it applies to elected officials on the municipal government, does it apply to our friends as MLAs and ministers in the provincial legislature, and what does that look like? Because they're elected officials just like you and I. And I know there's been lots of conversations around, that's why we have elections every 4 years, is so that the public does have a chance to decide who should stay and who shouldn't go. And I question even the foundations of democracy when you have say a certain provincial MLA or a minister or a provincial government come in and say with a wave of their magic wand, you are now no longer in office. And I sure hope that this doesn't become a political issue, because you and I both know, other than the Edmonton and Calgary, municipal government is nonpartisan. And we are the last form of government that doesn't, tout party lines and have to walk that line. We truly represent our residents, and we can show up, at a council meeting and not be tied to party and political lines, and we can truly get that message through. So being a little cautious, a little weary of what that means. And, I always look at it this lens too, and being nonpartisan is if you have this legislation in place, it's great. The current government sits there and says they're not going to abuse it. But what happens if we get a change in government? You and I both don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen in 4 or 6 years and who's going to be sitting around that table. And, you have to make sure that legislation is fair and respects the democratic process too at the same time.
Was Bill 54, was anything in Bill 54 something that RMA asked for?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't believe so. No,
And
no, it was,
because the one thing that I saw in there that I just want to get your opinion on is these citizens initiatives. So now it lowers the thresholds for citizens to come to their municipal councils, come to the province and say, we want to lead initiative to potentially put something on the ballot for 2026 or whatever the next election is. The Premier Danielle Smith sort of akin this to what happens in California with elections being propositions on about 12 different things. Are you comfortable as an elected official for citizens to have a voice on the ballot when really that's what you as an elected official is supposed to be doing, is being the voice of the people?
Well, it's definitely an interesting take on it because for instance, I look what we do in our municipality. My phone number is public. My email is public. I'm very public. You can catch me usually at the hockey arena. Trust me, if my residents need to find me, they can find me. I'm at the grocery store. You're out and about. So those conversations are happening and those asks are happening. And you and I both know council meetings are open to the public. And depending on what your municipality looks like, I mean, I would encourage residents to go and ask their municipal councils about how they have their voice heard. And for instance, for us, at 11 o'clock in every morning of our council meetings, the public's allowed to address council, so they can walk into the council chambers and they don't have to have a prepared presentation. None of those things. They could come and just have a chat with council, as long as they're respectful. Obviously, sometimes that can be, people get a little heated with some of the issues and stuff. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because, like you said, you get situations where you get 10 or 15 items on that type of a ballot. And it could be a lot. It's making sure that the right information is out there too, as well. So how to educate people when you're dealing with, I here's something very simple. Do you want a new swimming pool? Well, everybody's going to say yes. That's great, except you and I both know that's a $50 million ask. Who's paying for it? Where's the money coming from? Who are we upping taxes? Are we, cutting services to provide that service? There's all those types of conversations and information that needs to come behind it. So, I could see it being a tool, but again, I'm going to use that word. I can see it being weaponized too, as well. And I would really question if you have to put something on the ballot. There's a time and place for that, and for referendums, absolutely. But if it's something small that if you actually had a chat with your elected official or with your council, that could have been dealt with, at a council meeting, or if the council didn't act on it, what was their reasons for it? Because generally there's some contend be very good reasons, or we just have to sit down at the table and work a little harder to find solutions and a compromise to try and get some of these items forward too. So yeah, it's interesting. And I've seen those lots of conversations out there, and I watch the chatter on social media. One particular community out west near the Rockies, and there was, they put out a notice that they're borrowing for wastewater, and people were upset, and then, well, I don't want my tax dollars going to that. Well, that's great because you can already flush and turn your tap on, but there's another group of people that are coming in and they're trying to do economic development and they're trying to grow your community, and they need that type of infrastructure too at the same time. And it's so easy just to say no. Well, I don't want that. So why did you vote in favor of that? And when you're talking about things that are non-sexy, like water and wastewater and road infrastructure, it's difficult to have those type of conversations and make sure that they understand, right? So
it's going to be interesting
yeah.
to watch. Before I let you go, is there anything else you want to add about Bill 50 and Bill 54 that we haven't touched on yet?
We're watching them closely. And again, we've been offering solutions and making changes to the government. So time will tell if our concerns and our solutions will be heard. And a lot of our information and what we're working on obviously is available through the RMA's website. So if anybody that's listening, whether it's a resident or another elected official, if you want to jump on there, we do have member reports and here's what we've heard and here's what we've suggested, documents that are there too as well. So
for anyone who's watching this on YouTube or listening to this through any podcast, the links to RMA's website will be in the show notes. If you're watching this on TV, head over to crossborderinterviews.ca and the links will be there in the show notes, or to RMA, or rural, I think it's Rural MA, if I'm not mistaken. I don't even know what your website is. That's how bad this is. But the links will be in the show notes on the website as well. So thank you so much, Garth, for sitting down, President Westerland, for sitting down and chatting.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you do.
We want to thank everyone for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode and gained some valuable insights. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, and follow us on social media. For even more content and to learn more about the stories and people we feature on this show and our sister shows, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Now, your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time here on Municipal Affairs. Till then, everyone.